Hello, friends, and welcome to my today's lecture, that is the explanation of Wallace Stevens' poem of modern poetry. Of Modern Poetry by Wallace Stevens was published in his third volume of poetry, Parts of a World, published in 1942, and it was republished in 1951. Of modern poetry could be considered as half a poem and half a theory. For Wallace Stevens, being a modernist poet, tells us how to write poetry. The poet, using has to in quotes and must when talking about modern poetry, clearly express how he perceives modern poetry. Now I'll be reading the poem and then I'll explain what the poem is all about. Of Modern Poetry by Wallace Stevens. The poem of the mind in the act of finding what will suffice. It has not always had to find. The scene was set. It repeated what was in the script. Then the theatre was changed to something else. Its past was a souvenir. It has to be living to learn the speech of the place. It has to face the men of the time and to meet the women of the time. It has to think about war and it has to find what will suffice. It has to construct a new stage. It has to be on that stage and, like an insatiable actor, slowly and with meditation, speak words that in the delicatest ear of the mind, repeat exactly that which it wants to hear at the sound of which an invisible audience listens, not to the play, but to itself, expressed in an emotion as of two people, as of two emotions becoming one. The actor is a metaphysician in the dark, twanging an instrument, twanging a wiry string that gives sounds passing through sudden rightness, wholly containing the mind, below which it cannot descend, beyond which it has no will to rise. It must be the finding of a satisfaction and maybe of a man skating, a woman dancing, a woman combing. The poem of the act of the mind. Now, as we read through the poem, we could easily understand what the poem actually talks about. The very first line, the poem of the mind in the act of finding what will suffice. Now, as I had mentioned, that the poem of modern poetry could be considered as half a poem and half a theory. For Wallace Stevens, he tells us about how to write poetry, and he also expresses the way he perceives modern poetry. Now, in his poem, Stevens shares his rules or theories on how actually modern poetry should be. He feels modern poetry should be something new, something that is set upon the real places, real people, and even real events. It should not have any inhibitions to address the unpleasant objects too. Moreover, Stevens also wishes that modern poetry should focus only the actions of the mind itself and no other action of any other part of the body. Modern poetry should also help or assist people in finding contentment or satisfaction in their own lives and not somewhere outside. It also illustrates the novel or new demand that is made on poetry by the complex or the skeptical age. As we all know, modernism is considered to be the most complex of ages, or an age where man's life is full of complexities, but which also teaches him to face life squarely. He also states certain possible objects for poetry. Now, in my next lecture, I'll be explaining the poetry together with analyzing it. That's all for today. I'll be coming up with the explanation part in the next lecture. Till then, goodbye and thank you, friends.